Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we have, as always, a very exciting episode of Page Chewing. We are joined today by 4 of the 10 SPFBO finalists with royalty here, okay? And SPFBO9 just closed out, and we are just so excited to be able to talk to you guys about your experience with the whole competition. But first and foremost, if you guys could do just a little bit of a self-introduction and let those watching know who you are, maybe the book that you entered into the competition, and anything else about what you do in the book space that you'd like to add. Maybe we can go Connor, Jackie, RK, Josiah. Does that work?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Take it away, Connor.
So I am Connor. I'm Caplan. I am autistic. I'm a quadruplet. I wrote a book about not just a quadruplet called The Fall Is All There Is, which is basically just the weirdest shit you've ever seen. Like, just there's post-apocalyptic steampunk vibes with quadruplet royals trying to manipulate each other and each trying to get the throne after their father dies. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Jackie. I'm Jacquelyn Hagen. I'm the author of the Wickwire Watch. It's the first book in the Riverfall Chronicles. There are currently 3 books out in the series right now. The 4th one is coming out in a couple months this summer. It's the basic premise is it's about a boy who's being hunted down by dark spirits that he didn't know existed, and the only people who can keep him safe are a group of fugitives on the run from the law. Yeah, so that's me.
Hi, I'm RK Ashwick, a cozy fantasy romance author. The book that I submitted for SPFBO is A Rival Most Vile, Potioneering for Love and Profit, and it is about 2 rival potion shop owners who have to work together on a joint commission, and they fall in love.
Hello, I'm Josiah, aka J.D.L. Rosell. I'm an epic fantasy author, full-time at it. Have about 16 books, I think, out right now. My SPFBO finalist book was The Last Ranger, which on TikTok I pitched basically as a fantasy adventure following a lesbian ranger. So that basically gets you the gist of it.
You guys are so good at your elevator pitches. It's almost like you've had to do that a couple times by now. But we are just so delighted to have you on here, truly. I do want to bring up just a couple comments we have here. Of course, Crystal Matar is here. Connor,
Okay.
The Blush Is All There Is,
All
Caplan.
Right. I light up
we have
like a
Philip
Christmas
here.
tree. It's snow.
I'm excited for this conversation. Yes, thank you for being here, Philip. We have Luke here. Ooh, just finished editing a video and watched the wonderful discussion. Well, thank you for tuning in, truly. And Philip also had a comment about your books. I enjoyed all 4 of your books, each showcasing a different facet of fantasy. And I definitely agree with that. All of the different types of books we had this year was so much fun as a reader to experience. But before we get into the details of your individual works, I want to talk about the competition as a whole. So if someone's watching this, and we've so far, including myself in the intro, used the acronym SPFBO, it stands for the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off, which is a self-published fantasy competition that starts with 300 books, ends up with 10 finalists, and finally 1 winner. And we have 4 of those finalists here today, as I mentioned. And the competition is very cutthroat by nature, 300 books to 1. There's a lot going on there. But being a finalist is its own experience in and of itself. And I know that Crystal, who is in the chat as well, has been a finalist before. And I've heard her mention she was very stressed, but she was happy that she was able to find a group of 9 other people that she's still friends with today. So I'm just curious kind of where along that spectrum your experience lies with the competition as a whole, or, being a finalist specifically. You can take either of those aspects, but anyone can take the question. What in general has been your experience with this competition?
It's terrifying.
I was going to say, I think Connor and I have had the opposite experience because
Yeah.
no one has followed my process. Everyone was on the roller coaster in terms of like checking all the reviews and like seeing the numbers as they come in and reading the reviews. I was the opposite. I was like, I'm going to hold all y'all backpacks and I'm going to go to the churro stand and I am not going to read the reviews. I'm not going to look at any of the numbers. I'm just going to be here. And I don't know if anybody else followed that process. So that was just me. So I was having a perfectly pleasant time just being friends with all these people.
I don't have that kind of self-control to not look at these things, and I'm just, I think, very loud by nature, and so it just sort of leads to suddenly there's a lot more people tuning in for that loudness, like almost overnight, and so that was a bit of like that really like messed with my head at first. It was a bit of an adjustment to go from like very like not that many people sort of like tuning in to anything I have to say to suddenly like it's just this hyper visibility. I'm like, oh God, I have to actually watch what I say now. I didn't know that this was something I had to do. Wow.
So
Yeah, you're
these
important
last
now.
It's so weird.
these last few months, have you been watching what you're saying, Connor?
Yeah, I know it's surprising, but
I mean,
this is me attempting to have some form of a filter.
Okay, I'm just kidding.
what about you, Josiah? What's your experience been like for this?
Probably somewhere in between Connor and RK. So I read pretty much all the reviews for everybody as they went along, and sometimes it could ruin the day if it wasn't like whether it was for me or somebody else. I would get upset for bad reviews for other people too. But it was just so lovely having the finalist group. I do genuinely feel like friends with everybody that was in the finalists. I was super happy for Morgan when they won, and didn't feel bad at all about not winning. Like it was just lovely just being part of it.
Yeah, I think I was also somewhere in between. I definitely started out like Connor said, obsessively checking everything, and then I think about halfway through I realized it was not worth the pain and the agony and the terrible roller coaster ride. So yeah, then I dropped off a lot and kind of had to keep telling myself, perspective. You need to have perspective on all of this stuff, and it's don't obsess. And I think actually, Becca, you were very good at that, but I think Ryan was also there with you. I believe
he was with me at the
Yeah.
churro stand.
Ryan Kirk was very good at that too, just kind of staying out of the way. So they were smart about it. But it was very nerve-wracking until you realize you get a bigger scope of what's going on and what it means and how subjective it is and everything. But definitely a positive experience overall.
Oh yeah, for all I talk about how terrifying it is, like it was genuinely like lovely at the end of the day. And I would have been much more difficult if I did not have the other finalists to sort of talk to throughout the whole time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that helped.
Yeah. I wanted to put this comment by Ed up here. Crystal made friends. Thought we all became mortal enemies. Another finalist right here in the comments. Reluctantly bound together by the magic of Stockholm Syndrome. I also did want to put this up here. Tori Talks is here. So thank you, Tori, for coming by. Shad is also here. So I'm glad to hear that it's overall positive because, full disclosure, I am a judge over on Before We Go blog. So I'm on the other side of this, right? Now, Before We Go blog is an interesting judging setup or group because there's so many of us, right? So each book gets multiple reviews. So it's not like it lands on one person. So I don't know how Philip did it, speaking of who's in the chat right now, being the only person reading all of them. So my experience is very different from a solo reviewer, but it's really good to hear that it's a general positive experience from the other side as well. But I did want to get a little bit more specific and ask you guys how you chose the book that you wanted to enter, because I know quite a few of you have more than one book under your belt. And you have to choose, I imagine, very carefully what you think might work for a competition. And also, if you don't have other works under your belt, what was it that made you decide this is the time I'm going to enter this time with this book that I just wrote? So what was the deciding factor in either of those choices? Anyone can take that, whoever's ready.
I had already entered the other one, so this was my only option.
Same.
Fair enough.
So I've entered this was my 4th year entering, I think. So I just ran out of book ones.
So this was my very first book, my debut, my first year. And I heard about the contest because I was researching successful ways to market a book, all the different ways you can do that. And one of the things someone mentioned was entering contests. And so my research led me to SPFBO. It was the biggest indie fantasy contest. So I thought, great, that's a great way to market it. And it has been amazing for marketing. I mean, overall, the goal of SPFBO is to get eyes on these books. That is the #1 goal. And it definitely achieved that for sure. So it's a good decision.
Nice. For me, it was my first time entering SPFBO and my second book. It's the more recent one, and it was also the more popular one, and so I figured, why not throw that one into the mix? I think I had heard of SPFBO from a different author Discord, maybe about a week before the entries started. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And now I'm here. So, yep.
I didn't know that you guys a lot of you guys are just like professionals at this. You already know how the competition goes, got all that experience under your belt. So was there anything in this particular round that surprised you? Something about it? Something about
Making finalist?
Being a finalist?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do anything to celebrate, Connor? When you found out?
I bought a sword.
You bought a sword?
Yeah.
Stop.
Where's the sword,
here.
Connor?
It's right here.
Oh my God.
Nice.
It's literally
Nice.
I had made a deal with my fiance when I first published this book, which is you have to sell 600 copies before you're allowed to get a new sword. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's fair. And then I think I had gotten up to about 500 by the time I was a finalist, and she was like, just get the sword. Don't even worry about the last 100. It'll come. You'll get there. It won't even
That's
take
awesome.
long.
I
That's
didn't
awesome.
expect anything that epic. That's amazing.
You said another sword, right? So
Oh yeah, I got this one. I got when I sold 200 copies of my first book, and so I assume with every book she's going to raise the amount of copies I have to sell.
But what a great strategy.
Yeah, it's very motivating.
This whole time.
Yeah, you need to have sword tier rewards for whatever you want to do in life. I find that very motivating, honestly.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? What about anyone else? Did you guys do anything to celebrate when you found out you were finalists? Or just woo?
I got really confused when somebody told me I was a finalist, because I think I was maybe one of the last ones to be announced as a semifinalist. And then I didn't hear anything after, and I was like, oh, okay, I must have just stopped at semifinalist. That's fine. And someone reached out to me going, hey, congrats on being a finalist. And I was like, no, I'm not. I was a semifinalist. That just happened last week, you guys. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I had to Google it. But no, beyond that, I didn't do anything.
Gotcha.
Wow, that's amazing. And I just want to, and Taylor asked an excellent question, for the edification of anybody who is watching and isn't as familiar with SPFBO. Yes, so for the finalists, typically, and of course the rules are about to change for SPFBO 10. I hope we get the chance to talk about that as well. But prior to this, for the first 9 SPFBOs, one of the rules that Mark Lawrence, who founded and organized the contest, had imposed was that the books entered had to be either a standalone or the first book in a series, etc. So for those finalists who had multiple books to choose from, might have to pick which one, as Taylor said, worked best for to submit, because they might have a standalone that they might have pondered, the first book in one series versus the first book in another series. So that's part of the background there.
Yeah, for sure. And we will talk about looking towards the future for sure a little bit later. But one last thing that I wanted to ask the general for all of you, not one last thing, one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, all of you, except for Jackie, have initials in your pen name. And I'm just curious, out of a bunch of the other finalists do too, is this a thing? I'm just very surprised by how many people have it. Were you guys surprised as well? Is this a trend that you find with self-pub? What's going on?
Maybe it's a trend. I don't know.
I had put some stuff out on the internet before I was like an author under like my actual name kind of stuff, and I was like, I don't want anyone to find that. You know, it was like, I mean, it's been thoroughly scrubbed. It's a lot of amateur stuff when I was like 17 or whatever the fuck, and it was just sort of like eventually I was like, I should write under a different name, like just a bit of a crowbar separation between that and anything I wrote at 17. So it was just sort of like that was literally the only reason. I had an Uber driver once make fun of me because I mentioned that I went with CM Caplan. Like, your name is Connor. Why didn't you put that in your thing? Like, that's such a unique name.
Well, I mean, props to you for putting what you wrote when you were like 16 out on the internet, because that is going to get burned. It's in the back of my closet somewhere. Like, that's never seeing the light of day. So that's a special kind of bravery right there. But what about you, Josiah or RK? Is there a reason, or it just sounded good?
Yeah, I didn't have a specific reason. Sorry, this is my cat Leia. She's made an appearance.
We love pets here.
Yeah, no, I didn't have a specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's maybe slightly, I don't know if you would say it's embarrassing, maybe. So I wanted it to sort of be like J.R. Tolkien, right? I was like, oh, 3 initials. That sounds awesome. It's just like him. So yeah, you know, that's partly why. Also the kind of rhyming J.D.L, Rosell.
Think it's working. You sell a lot of books, so maybe you'll catch Tolkien one day. Turn the sales, you know.
Oh gosh, no. Impossible.
Yeah, there's so many reasons for, I guess, having initials or having a pen name or a pseudonym, and it's just fascinating to hear what the motivation is. And for some people, it's just kind of random, and that's okay too, right? You just decide, be fun to be. It's almost like having an alter ego on someone else, right? That's not why I chose mine, but I'm just saying in general, like, you know, it's just kind of cool when you get to write using another name. So
I knew you just SPL for an embarrassingly long time. Like, I didn't actually know what your name was for a ridiculous amount of time. So it works.
That's all good. That's all good. I want to ask the finalists here, and I'm picking from the thread that Jacquelyn referred to in terms of the scope and the weight of SPFBO. So my question for all 4 of you is, truth or not, SPFBO has grown to the point where it is essentially like, and in the most positive ways, not or perhaps not, like the Hugo or the Locus Award. Like it essentially is like the biggest indie, you know, fantasy competition and award out there right now. And is that, if you think it is, or if you think it's not, enough to hear the opinions, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, think for a sec.
Take your time.
Yeah. Initially, it strikes me as a good thing, because the bigger it gets, the more use it has for the people who enter it. You know, so like the more people that enter it, the more prestigious it is to get further along in the contest, the more exposure, theoretically, they would also get. Sorry, my cat's also trying to make an appearance. So that's how it strikes me initially. I know there's been some controversy around how the selection process is for next year for SPFBO 10, which I get, because as it gets bigger, right, it gets harder to enter each year. So that is a downside, but I think overall it's positive from my perspective.
I think that's a good assessment.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Connor, Jacquelyn?
I think it's positive in terms of it helps as the prestige of the contest grows. It also helps with like authors get to know each other, and sort of like it helps with like making friends or networking, or like being able to find other people in like a community. Even if you don't even make semis, it often will like raise your profile, just because more people become aware of you by virtue of being in the contest. I think in many ways it's a net positive. Even for people who don't get to like semifinals or finals, there's still like a boost that you get out of it.
Josiah, I think your cat is about to bring something crashing down. Just FYI.
I know. I see her back there. Mischievous.
What's her name?
Zelda.
Zelda.
Amazing.
Oh,
I would agree with everybody. Yeah, it's great that the contest is getting more traction and visibility. Largely positive thing, of course. And the only caveat, not really a caveat, but just, I don't know, note I would make is that as long as it's kept in mind what the aim of the competition is and what it is not, I think that gets mixed up a lot. Again, the main aim is to get eyes on books. There were a lot of people that got cut early and semifinalists and people who had great books who deserved more than they got. And it doesn't mean their books are terrible. It doesn't mean their books didn't belong at the head with everyone else. There's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of subjectivity. It is ultimately to get eyes on books. And there are a lot of people doing great things to further that cause. I mean, even after finalists are picked, there are other people doing, videos and threads and things to highlight other books in the contest, which is great. So I think overall very positive.
Yeah, that's incredible. And quickly before I ask my next question, those are excellent answers, by the way. I do have to give, and we're so grateful for all of you being here, I do have to give a special shout out to Connor. He essentially organized getting you all together for both this broadcast, the first one with SPFBO finalists that we're doing now, and the second one that we're doing later tonight. So huge shout out and thank you to Connor for putting that all together. It really meant a lot. So thank you so much. Gracias. Connor, you're amazing for doing that. So
thank you, Connor.
Yes. So I also wanted to ask, in saying all this, and Taylor brought up some outstanding questions about the experience. Is this experience so obviously you get this competition hoping that you'll make it far for most people that enter. Some people are, again, there's different motivations. Some people simply want to enter, see what happens, just glad to have some bloggers who may have some ability to provide you with some traction, some influence to get your work out there. That's a motivation, obviously. But I think most of us would admit somewhere deep inside they're dreaming, oh, could I get to the semifinals? Could I get to the finals? Could I even win the whole thing? So all that aside, is the experience, and not just where you wound up as reaching essentially the pinnacle of being finalists, was the experience what you thought? What was surprising for you about being a finalist, your journey, what it was like when you got there? Was there anything that you did? I mean, you all knew a lot essentially about the competition going in and what it was like, but were there any surprises, and how was it? Was it what you thought it might be if you got to that milestone which you made? And of course, congratulations for that. What was it like?
I think for me, since this is my first time entering and I didn't know a whole lot about the competition before I entered, I really didn't have any expectations going in. Yeah, I just figured it would just be like another thing where you submit the book, you kind of go away. If something happens, you hear about it. If nothing happens, no big deal. And so I was pleasantly surprised, I think particularly at the finalist Discord, and just being able to actually get to know the other people in the thing. But beyond that, I didn't really have any expectations. Josiah and Connor, I don't know if you guys were different because you have had more experience with it.
I had a lot of I knew a lot of what to expect because I was really good friends with Crystal in their year. And so during SPFBO9, I got a lot of DMs about how things were going during that process a few years back and everything. So it was kind of like a little peek behind the curtain as it was happening. And like the highest highs and the lowest lows. It was sort of like I kind of knew what I was in for. And it did deliver on a lot of what I was expecting in that regard. It was like a really, really cool journey, and also just a little bit wow, there's a lot of people. There sure are a lot of people with a lot of opinions. This is an interesting time. But it's been wonderful to get to know a lot of the finalists and everything, and and find all of the books through the last year, the contest and everything.
A lot of people and a lot of opinions is a great way to just summarize this entire experience, I feel like.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us and we all got something to say.
Yeah.
What about you two, Jacquelyn, JD? What did anything unexpected, anything catch you by surprise? Maybe you thought, or that you learned along the way, or
Well, something that just struck me with what you guys just said, a lot of people, a lot of opinions, and any tiny tweak in the proceedings and the whole ranking could have been upended, at any moment. But yet, and it's a good surprise, but we were all so close.
Yeah.
So close. That was amazing. I was kind of heartened, actually. Am heartened by that. So, but that was a surprise. It was a good surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, my answer isn't original. It was basically the finalist Discord. I hadn't even thought about necessarily making finalists, or even what that would entail, right? So having that Discord and just like getting to bond, even if it is Stockholm syndrome, like Ed says, still lovely to have those bonds and the background discussion.
And related to what Jackie said, I think for the longest time in the competition, weren't all the books only like 1 point away from each other, or 1.5, from last to first? It was nuts, particularly with how different all the books were. And again, someone mentioned subjectivity, just how a lot of the books weren't all the bloggers' cups of tea. There was, really dark Western, and also cozy fantasy, and also cozy adjacent, and then a murder mystery. It really just ran the gamut, and that was interesting to see how I think maybe some of the bloggers were thrown off by some of the subgenres, which is fine. But that was also interesting.
If we're talking about how close things were, we have to point out it was 0.05 between Katie and Morgan for that first place. That's insane.
Oh god, that was intense. I was just even just Katie was fifth or something for a while, and then there was one score, and then all of a sudden she was at the top of the board.
Yeah,
that was just that. I mean, that in and of itself speaks to how tight the race was.
And there were 2 ties, right? There was tie for third, tie for sixth.
Right.
Yeah, we tied together.
Got her.
To be clear, I realized I did nothing to indicate who I was tying with.
Yeah, I mean, as from a judge's point of view too, it was very interesting because being one judge on one team and then there's 10 blogs involved, we didn't know what the results would be either, right? We just knew what we thought. So we're also watching the boards, after we submit our points as well. So I thought it was thrilling to watch the end come out. And just for those watching, Morgan Stang is the one who is the winner. If you're curious, Murder at Spindle Manor 0.5 squeaked out as the winner, and it is well deserving of that title. So as everyone's books are in the top 10. Yes. I just want to shout Morgan out because not here right now. So to speak for himself or herself. So I have a couple individualized questions for each of you. Obviously, if you feel like adding more to it and we can go off into another discussion, that's totally fine. But I did a little bit of digging on your websites, and I'm very curious about how some of what you guys do in your life may have affected the book that you've written. So I would like to start with Connor, because The Fall Is All There Is, all of the reviews say how chaotic and genre-bendy and just a beautiful mess your book is. Pretty much every review says something of that. And how profound it is for being those things. But the thing that I see the most is genre-bendy. So I'm curious if that was something that you specifically wanted to do. Did you want to take, all of these elements, post-apocalyptic, fantasy, horror, and blend them all? Or is that just kind of an expression of who you are in your life so far, and that's just what came out when you started writing?
There was a bit of both going on. From the start, I knew that the Cyborg Horses was the first sort of visual I had for that story. But for a while it was much more grounded than it turned out to be in the last sort of pass. The weirdness only came like probably a couple months from the actual publication of the book, but it sort of arrived in layers. So like it was initially much more grounded, and then I think I got some feedback in a very, very late draft where someone was like, the cyborg horses are really cool, but it feels like there's that tech isn't necessarily layered out into the rest of the world. And I was like, oh, okay, so what would a society that could make whatever these things are do with other pieces of technology and everything? And it just sort of spiraled out of control from there. And so a lot of it came from just how I put it together in terms of like it all flowed very naturally. A lot of the chaos in terms of like the pacing of the story is like that's just naturally how I write, in terms of like no matter what genre I'm in, usually the things I write turn out to be paced like you're having a heart attack, and it's just like I can't do anything about that. I've tried to write slower paced stuff, and it just doesn't work, because I'm just naturally apparently writing very intense sort of with intense narrative momentum. But it got sort of more chaotic as it went along, because I was just sort of like, fuck it, you know what else can I do with this at a certain point? And that part was more intentional. The weirdness and everything was more mined out.
So you just leaned into it at a certain point. I love
Yeah.
that.
There were inklings there, and then eventually I was like, all right, if I'm gonna do this, I might as well go all in.
I must say the cyborg horse on the front it catches your attention immediately.
Oh,
By the way, all of your
absolutely.
covers are amazing. I want to put that out there too. Very eye-catching, all of them. So props to your cover artists for that. But I did want to ask you also, do you read a lot of sci-fi? Because there's lots of sci-fi vibes, and a lot of writers are also readers, right? So Connor, is there a lot of sci-fi in your history, or?
Not as much as you'd expect, honestly. I think the genre blending stuff came from stuff like the Broken Earth trilogy, like that kind of stuff, where it's sort of like there's clearly some sci-fi sort of stuff going on in there. But like it's not specifically trying to be one genre or sticking to one genre convention. So those are the kinds of stories that I noticed I was like gravitating towards while writing this thing and before writing this thing. And I just sort of was like, well, if this is the kind of story that really is resonant with me, I should probably be doing something like that, because that's going to really help fuel my interest in getting to the end of this thing.
That's a really good point about that was kind of what you were into or reading at the time, because PL and I actually recently had this discussion with another guest that self-pub allows for so much genre blending in the way that trad doesn't. And I'm wondering if you all knew you were going to go the self-pub route in the beginning, or was there a goal for going towards trad, or like maybe when you finally developed the story, maybe like in Connor's case, you're like, yeah, this is not like no editor is going to want this, but I want to do this, so I'm going to do it my way. How did you guys come to the conclusion that you were going to do self-pub, at least this time around? Anyone can take that.
I guess I'll jump in then. So my first book, it's now unpublished, but it was my manuscript for my master's program, and I tried. So it was kind of had like a different inspiration or like purpose in what I was first creating it for, but I still thought, hey, maybe I can get this published somehow. So I submitted that one for trad back in 2016, 2015. And got really nowhere. It was about maybe 8 to 10 rejections before I was like, I'm just gonna do this myself. I was listening to Joanna Penn, the Creative Penn podcast, probably some other ones at that time, and I was like, okay, I know self-publishing is a viable route, and I'd rather not just be submitting to TradPub for forever, right? So went ahead and went for it. I made mistakes, of course, and I think they all were very valuable, though, because they helped me learn for the next book and the next book. So yeah, I think it's okay to not put out a perfect book, to get your feet wet and try things out, because you can always pivot, you can always do better. And yeah, so I'm really happy I went self-pub now.
I think my story is pretty similar to Josiah in that my first book, Stray Spirit, I started querying. It was a COVID book. I started writing it during COVID, like many others. And then I started querying. And at the same time, I was friends with several self-published authors on Tumblr. And I was seeing what they did and how it was so cool that they had control over their covers, and they were doing these really cool pre-order campaigns, and they could just kind of do what they wanted. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And yeah, after several months of just not making it anywhere in a querying, I was like, well, you can either be in the query trenches for years, or I could just learn from what my friends are doing and do it myself. And that's the route that I went, and I don't regret it.
Yeah, I also tried the route of traditional publishing for a little while. I sent out a few dozen queries, I think, trying to get a literary agent. And I did get a few bites. I got a couple of requests for full manuscript, partial manuscript. So there was a little bit of interest, but it never went any farther than that. And they don't tell you the reason. It could be the market. It could be, a million things. So after a while, I thought, I'm just going to stop beating my head against the wall, because I'm just going to do this for fun. I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, it's the thing I love. So I'm just going to write for me. And for a long time, that was the rule. I'm just writing for me, because I enjoy it so much. And then finally, I had a friend a couple of years ago who encouraged me to look into self-pub. And I didn't know it was this whole big industry. All of a sudden, I hadn't been following it. And so when I dug into it, did research, I also followed Joanna Penn and a couple of others. It really opened my mind. And like Becca said, I also love being able to be in charge of almost every aspect of it, to have that much control. It's a lot of fun, and I don't regret it at all.
Yeah, I came to it because I initially queried with my debut, The Sword in the Street. I had finished it at when I was 23, and then COVID happened like a few months, like literally the month after I finished the final draft of it. And querying during COVID was just a terrible experience. Do not recommend. If there's going to be a pandemic, don't query during it. Next time there is one. It's like a lot of the feedback I got for it was like, this is really good. It's not the kind of stuff we would publish. It's like just outside the realm of like something we would know how to market. And so that sort of told me a lot of what I needed. Like, okay, so this is good enough that I could probably put this out there. But it doesn't seem like an editor's going to want to be anywhere near this. And so since then, I've just sort of gravitated towards self-pub.
I just love how all of you made the point to say, like, this is a decision that you're proud of. Because when I asked the question, did you try trad first? I'm not saying, did you fail and then go to self-pub? I think a lot of people take it that way, and that is not what that question is. It's just two different choices, right? And as someone who is part of SPFBO and has been for a couple of years now, a bunch of self-pub on my shelves, I think people are really missing out if they don't allow themselves to perceive them in the same way. So it's really a shame, but I'm glad that all of you are happy and proud of the decision you made, because you damn well should be. But I wanted to ask another question, another specific question, this time to Jackie. So I noticed on your website that you mentioned you had a brief stint in entertainment, and as I was lucky enough to have read the Wickwire Watch as part of my allotment from Before We Go blog. And that book reads very cinematic at times, especially a particular setting that I shall not name here for spoilers. But there's a particular setting that reads very cinematic in how it moves and how it exists within the rest of the world. And I'm curious if you think working in entertainment for that small stint might have affected the way that you write and made it a bit more visual, a bit more made for a screen, because I could definitely see parts of that book doing really well on the screen.
Oh, definitely. I'm kind of an outlier in this community, because I'm really a huge movie nerd, more than a book nerd. I mean, I love books and I love stories and I read a lot, but movies are really where I started my love of story ever since I was a little kid. And I did, after I finished high school, I went to film school and I got a degree in film and television production. And then I moved out to LA and worked out there for a couple of years, different little studios doing internships. But always loved, very visual learner as well, very visual person anyway. So, and everything I learned in film school, all of the internships I had, some of them involved reviewing movies, which meant digging into what makes these stories work on multiple levels, characters and visual and plot and pacing, everything. So that was an education all on its own. So all of these things, definitely fed into when it was time for me to create my own. For sure, that was kind of inevitable in a way, but yes. And you're not the first person to have made that comment, and probably won't be the last. Yeah.
I mean it in the best way possible. I could visualize it so clearly.
Yeah. That was the intent. So good.
Oh, it came through. Yay. I just wanted to put up a couple comments here saying movies and TV nerds unite. Tori also agrees. And also we have the lovely Esme here with us. Talk about a juggernaut in the reviewer space. And I did want to pull up a comment here from Philip, just going back to the closeness of the competition. He made a good point here. The close scores really reflect the high quality of the writing. And that is something that I noticed with everything that I read. Quality was top tier this time around. And Luke also says 0.05 is insane. I know it's a cliche to say, but all those books are winners. Yay! pretty much nothing between them in terms of scores, as Philip says, quality. So we are not alone in those opinions. All right. So next, I had a question for Josiah, actually. So I saw something that's also close to my heart, which is that you do archery as a hobby. And that's something I have also dabbled in my life. It's so fun. But there's a very obvious connection in your book that on the cover, your main character is an archer. And I was wondering if that came first, your interest in archery came after. What is the connection between the two, if there is one? And did it help you write your character?
Yeah, no, it came from wanting to write an archer. So I had always been interested in archery, but I just never really had the opportunity or like the funds to buy a bow, and all the equipment that goes with it. So it was kind of like an excuse, to finally pick it up. And yeah, no, it's great. And I really enjoy it. I'm very bad still, very bad, but I'm enough to be dangerous, right? Probably to myself. So yeah, it apparently worked well enough. So like Julia Kitsavar, I can't remember her last name, but Julia, she's a reviewer over at Fantasy Book Critic, I think. Fantasy Faction. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And she had said something about archery and fantasy at one point. I was like, oh, I need to like reach out to her and see if she's interested in this sort of stuff. And yeah, sure enough. And so like she was an early reader on it to kind of check that archery stuff. And as far as I'm aware, I think she's amateur as well, but she's been doing archery for a while. And yeah, it passed muster. So dipping my toes into archery did apparently work for the book.
A bow is expensive, man. I don't blame you for wanting an excuse, but maybe you should switch to swords, like Connor. That work better.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely want to.
No, there's some really good like $200 swords out there. Honestly, like there's some that like the really high end one cost $1,000, but there's if you know where to look, you can find them that are for like a reasonable price, at least as far as swords are concerned.
We'll be talking, man.
I didn't think I'd be getting sword recommendations, but I'm digging it. Hold on, I gotta say, Tori, are you listening? Because earlier she had a comment. Let me see if I can find it. Where's her comment? Hold on. Here we go. I'm definitely utilizing the sword strategy from now on. So you're getting the inside intel right now.
It's a solid strategy.
Sabers especially,
is.
there's some really good ones, like they're like really solidly constructed ones for like $50 on Amazon. Like those are especially like somehow pretty easy to make, apparently.
Mm-mm. And Esme agrees, being a judge was painful this year. And Tori says, I'm saving up for a katana. It's going to happen. Love that for
You
you.
deserve a katana.
Truly. And then obviously, last but certainly not least, I have a question for RK, which your book is, it has a lot of elements going into it. You know, there's the romance element, there's the cozy element, but all of it is kind of wrapped up in this potions dynamic, right? It's kind of like the package which everything comes in. So I'm curious, what made you choose potion making as the vessel for your story? Because there's a lot of things that can carry that. So why potions?
What a great question. When I first came up with the idea for the book, it was just the phrase rival potion shops that like popped in my head, and that was it. And I was like, oh yeah, potion shops are like cool. I like D&D. And honestly, it just went from there. I don't have any specific potion or science background. I actually had to talk to a couple of my engineering and science and like chemistry friends on Tumblr to ask a little bit about some of their processes, and particularly for the artwork in the book, ask about like, hey, how do you structure your notes, and how do you structure like diagrams and like chemistry notes and things like that. But I guess the inspiration deep down must have come from my love of D&D NPCs. And just the various things that they can do. So it's not just the potioneers on Rosamond Street, but also there's the jeweler and the armor and the artificer, and they're all friends. And there's no combat, and nobody's dying, and it's great. I love D&D NPCs. I love cute little towns that you can go shopping in. But yeah, I guess that's also why I write cozy. So.
No one's dying and you can go shopping in a cozy town. That's a perfect selling point. I know many people who would love to read that. Very much so.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. I did want to ask for all of you, for all the finalists. So I know for myself as a judge, I'm feeling Taylor feels the same way. People such as Philip, who are watching in the audience, those are some judges. I know we certainly feel, and it actually astounds me every year I've done it, I've participated as a judge, just how intense things are and the hype. Like it seems with every year, the hype for this competition grows, and sometimes it's almost as if you get lost in that. But at the end of the day, there's a competition. There's people who move on. There's an eventual winner, and there's also a lot of positive benefits, I think, that some of you have talked about as being part of it. And then there's the aftermath, and it almost seems as okay, we've barely announced the winner, and then it's on to the next competition, right? So, but there is a residual from all that, and I think sometimes we forget what the residual is, especially for like the finalists and the finalists, the semi-finalists, and everyone who's been part of the competition. So now that the competition is finished, how has this whole thing, how are you feeling now that the hype obviously is in a way, there's this crescendo, and then the winner's announced and it's amazing and everybody's focus seems beyond that, and then it's over, and then we're on to the next competition. So what are some of the residuals for you that have come out of this build up, this hype, and now you're okay, now you that finalist flags fly forever, that finalist tag is going to be with you forever. It's going to be perhaps a highlight for, I'm sure a lot of you have a lot more accolades to go, or success, but it's going to be something that sticks with you, that tag. You're an SPFBO finalist, that means something. And obviously, again, congratulations. But now that's all done, what's the residual feeling like? I know it's early, competition just finished, but where do you feel now about where you are in terms of having participated, what the result of, some of you may not be able to speak about it, but for example, we know that we've talked about querying stuff, people have gotten interest from traditional publishers. Once you get that moniker that you've done so well in the competition, like there's other positive things that come out. I've heard people getting translation deals because you got that. Like so where are you now that the competition is done and kind of the initial hype is done? Like where are you all sitting now? How do you feel? And just in general about the competition.
For me, I'm actually actively working on the sequel to Rival Most Vile. and I'm hoping to release that in October this year. So I'm kind of hoping that I can get like a couple more readers for Rival, and then so hopefully they'll be excited about the release of Captured Cauldron in the fall. I think that's what's coming up next for me.
Yeah, no, I've also got a book too that I'm working on. It's a lot easier to write now that the contest is over, because every time I tried during the contest, Crystal Matar gave me advice of like work on something else, because in their experience, like anything they worked on during their time in the contest, it was just sort of like by the end of it, it was just like I hate this. I can't work on this anymore. And that was true to my own experience with this, where it's like by the end of it, I was working on a bunch of completely unrelated stuff. And by the end of the contest, I was like, I don't even want to look at this idea anymore. I just want to burn everything I've written over the last few months. And then as soon as the contest was over, it's like, wow, suddenly I'm able to write so much without like feeling like I'm in a glass box and everyone's looking at me. Wow, it's amazing what that will do to your productivity. So that's been the one thing that I notice has changed, at least so far, is like I'm just more productive and not as angry at the things that I write.
Yeah, I would say overall the biggest feeling for me is just a huge sense of relief. Just sheer relief. Because like I said, the contest is meant to shine a spotlight on finalists, and that's a wonderful thing. But to be under it for a year or more, or a little less than a year, you start to it starts to mess with your head, or it can.
Yeah.
So it's like the spotlight is finally trying to swivel away, and there is a relief in that, and you can concentrate on other things. But like you said, the residual benefit. I mean, I think all of us have continued to see it. I mean, in the sales and the things like interviews, and it's really been wonderful. So I definitely recommend the contest to anyone. Just be ready for. Just I don't even know how to finish that sentence other than be ready for experiencing every emotion you could possibly experience. And
Strap in for the roller coaster.
Yeah, just strap in. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And hey, at the very least, we have our finalist coins, so we'll never forget.
Yeah,
that's true. I do love the finalist coin.
So
yeah, they're so much heavier than I thought they'd be.
No, it is fantastic. And I just want to quickly say, before I start off with my questions and all that, that from what I can see, and again, even as a judge, I'm sure Taylor would agree, you're also caught up in a lot of the hype and immersion, and with every review and trying to track all the different blogs reviews and comparing our views of this book to another blogs and talking to the other bloggers, they thought after the reviews come out, and just we're all wrapped up in it, right? And it's wonderful, it's amazing, it's exciting. But yeah, it is I can imagine as being a finalist also too is rewarding. Like you said, there is somewhat of a potentially a pressure cooker. I know it seems like arcade for you kind of managed to manage it really well and more or less tune out, but I think that's rare, and kudos for that. But I think a lot of finalists that we've talked to in the past, they feel that pressure. But I'd like to say that from my very outside unexpert opinion, you and all the finalists I've seen have handled it with enormous grace and aplomb. So kudos to how you've dealt with all that pressure and everything that comes with the glory of being a finalist. So
I agree with that. Not only is it a pressure cooker, but like you said, there's a lot of people and lots of opinions. So I'm sure the book community has been interesting this year with the relationship between reviewers and authors. There's just it's a cyclical thing every year, but it really seems to be picking up this year in the way that those two camps have been communicating with each other. So it was a very fraught year, I feel like, to know how to engage with a review. So if you don't feel comfortable sharing any personal thoughts you had, that's totally fine. But I'm wondering if there were any challenges in that specific realm where maybe a review came out, and not that you would scream about it on main, because most people would not do that. But if there was a review that came out that made you feel, oh, someone really understood what I was trying to say here, or that's not what my intention was, and yet, right? So did you guys feel like you had any standout moments like that? You don't have to name the review or anything, but a standout moment where a review made you reflect on your writing in a different way, or maybe in a positive or a negative light, either way.
I didn't realize what I was writing was so dark. I was not, there was one line that I got a lot from a couple different blogs that I was not expecting to, which was just like, this was the most harrowing experience I've ever had, and I loved every second of it. And it's like, I was not expecting it to be that extreme. And so that was fun, and that sort of also helps me sort of figure out like who I'm pitching this book to in some ways. But I figured it was dark. I did not know it was that dark, and that was a fun surprise for me.
If someone's calling your book dark next to Cold West, then you've got some dark stuff in there.
Yeah, honestly.
So I can't wait to talk to Clayton and be like, what? Who hurt you?
Literally,
that book is brutal.
So incredible.
It's brutal. Anyone else have any thoughts in the review realm?
I didn't read any of the reviews, but occasionally the Discord will send me like specific quotes or very specific things. And one of them was a reviewer compared Ambrose and Eli to Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. And so then I had to draw it. So that was a highlight for me. You can find the drawing on my Instagram. It's there.
I love that. That's so cute and pure. Also, just before we move away from the fall is so delightfully unhinged is Esme's comment there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, on reviews, I had to like, so sometimes, yeah, there were those moments when you're like a reviewer captured, like they got what you were trying to do, and they would still like pick up on the flaws of the book. And I'm like, yeah, I agree all around with everything you're saying. And those moments were amazing. It was infuriating sometimes. I don't think it happened super often with mine, but sometimes they would get details wrong in books, and you're like, wait a second, what's happening here? So those moments were a little infuriating, but that's going to happen. You know, everybody's reading a lot of books. And I think you also have to kind of remember, I'm not sure that the reviews aren't necessarily to the authors, just like, and this has kind of been the greater conversation, right? Reviewers aren't reviewing for authors' purposes. They're reviewing to speak to readers. And so I think I had to like, I've reckoned with that before. I had to reckon with it again during this contest. And I think it's probably just an iterative process to come more and more to terms with that. But yeah, it's always a growing experience.
I think that's a great point. And I just wanted to say that this is, I think, a very unique situation, which is why I asked you guys about it, because you're supposed to be watching for the reviews because it's a competition in the way that I think generally authors aren't doing, or talking about reader and author space. There's usually a gap there in the sense that there typically isn't, unless you have, you know, a will of steel like RK. Usually there isn't that because naturally you're waiting for the results, right?
It's more fear-based. I don't get why more people don't do it. I'm just afraid, so I don't look.
You know, I think that that's a certain type of bravery and strength in and of itself, though, because there are a lot of people that are afraid of it, and therefore they look, right? So, but I didn't want to take away Jackie's chance to also comment on what I said. I just wanted to add to it. Josiah said, did you have any thoughts in that realm at all, Jacquelyn?
So I think all of us have had our highs and lows, and at this point in the competition, like Josiah said, the reviews are for readers; they're not for the authors. You can't go back and fix things and then resubmit while you're a finalist in the competition. It can only, if you're going to take into account what's being said, it can only inform on future books. And even then, going back to the subject of all of us have highs and lows in our scores, well, like for me, I thought, well, so what do you do with this information? You're getting all these mixed messages. Everybody's subjective. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people understand it, some people don't. It's about finding your audience. This judge is my audience. This judge is not my audience. So what do you do? Do you let that inform on your own skill and talent and intuition? Or do you just think, all right, well, all things considered, I'm doing well, and I'm going to continue to trust my own instinct. It's so when you continue to write, I think it's really just reinforcing that you should be writing to, first of all, write the best story you can, and second of all, please yourself, not please the rest of the world. I mean, if we were more concerned with pleasing the rest of the world, we'd be traditionally published or still trying. But it's really, I think it's really taught me to trust myself more and not to try to bend every which way to please everyone's tastes, because that's never going to happen. And that's not where your focus should be anyway. So it was very educational for me.
Profound. I think a lot of people need to take that on board in general in the community. So, time goes so fast. So what is quast? So quast. No, we're coming up on an hour. And I wanted to kind of put a question out there for the people who might be thinking about entering SPFBO, right? So not only have you guys been through the competition multiple times, many of you, but you also have the unique experience of being the pressure cooker of the finalists, as we said many times here. And I think you are uniquely qualified to give a little bit of advice for people who might be interested in doing this in the future. It can be advice for, I think, as Jackie mentioned earlier, preparing yourself a little bit, strapping in. It can be advice for how to choose a book, how to know when it's the moment to submit, kind of any advice that you would give anyone for any time in the process. What would you say to aspiring authors looking to get into SPFBO?
Engage with the community, honestly. It's going to be stressful, like no matter how far you get. And it's going to be a lot easier to bear if you have like other people to talk about it with, and just to engage with, because that's only going to help you in the long run in like a couple different levels. That's probably the smartest thing you can do for yourself.
And I think I've mentioned this before, but just to hit on it again, I would say do not hang your worth as a person or a writer on the results of this contest.
That's a big question, so take your time answering it, both of you. But I do want to comment on Connor's advice there, which I think is a really good suggestion, not only for those who are submitting, but also for those who are just readers. Like if you follow the SPFBO competition, even if you're not involved in an official capacity as a judge or whatever like that, engaging with the community as you're reading them, whether it's writing a blog, just posting on Twitter when you loved a book. As Jacquelyn said many times, it's getting eyes on books. So engaging with the community and talking about a book that you read that you enjoyed, especially in connection with this competition, I highly encourage everyone to be doing that. Even if it's not rating the book, just saying, I liked this, right? Because I know Philip doesn't do stars, right? So I'm not saying you have to write a Goodreads review, but I do really encourage people to just shout about it if it's something that they enjoyed from the reader's side.
Yeah, that was a very helpful part of this whole process. Was like there were a bunch of readers and reviewers who would sort of jump in to shout about you during the contest, just to sort of get on the sort of SPFBO bandwagon. So that's always been fun.
I guess my advice would be to compartmentalize, because the contest, it does take a really long time. I mean, how long has it been since we first joined like the finalist Discord? It's been
more than like 6 months.
Half a year, maybe. And so, yeah, I wouldn't go in like, I guess I wouldn't want somebody to go in and get totally wrapped up in it, because that can get exhausting in the long term. And I wouldn't want that to like distract from like other things going on with you. So yeah, I guess compartmentalize would be my advice.
This dovetails along with what everybody else is saying, and I think we said it at the beginning, but there's a lot of luck, especially I think in those early rounds to advance. Like who you get placed with, what's their taste, do they get what you're putting down? So just remember it, like keep your expectations, hope for the best, expect the worst, that trite statements. But I think that can really help with your mental health, and that this can be very draining on it. So you don't want to do that.
For sure, it is a long haul. It takes a long time to read that many books, even with all the judges going on all cylinders, so that's great advice. And I did want to put up Crystal's comment here because it's kind of a reflection of what everyone was saying. The only thing it changed, I'm meaning reviews in the competition, I think, in my later writing, is teaching me how to think about my intended audience ahead of time instead of figuring out who they are after publishing, which I think is a great way to look at it in retrospect. But time. Okay, so I have more questions, but you've all been so delightful and wonderful to talk to. And I want to give everyone watching this a chance to know where to find you, what to look for from you. Because clearly y'all are good at what you do, considering where you got in this competition. So if people want to get your books or see your future things, just get to know you a little better on social media, if that's your thing, go ahead and let people know where they can find you, where they can buy your stuff, and anything you have planned for the future. Maybe we could do the same order as the sign in, the introduction. So what was it? Connor, Jackie, Josiah, and RK, I believe.
Yeah. So The Falls All There Is on Amazon and Audible. I'm on Twitter at CM Caplan Writes, and everywhere else is the CM Caplan. I'm most active on Twitter, so if you want to reach out, that's probably where I'll see it. I'm most likely to see it. And then I have a link tree somewhere that's probably at the CM Caplan that has any other sort of relevant links.
So my book, The Wickwire Watch, it's wide, so you can find it Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, anywhere they sell books, really. And like I said, the first 3 books are already out. All of them are also available on audio on Spotify or ACX or Audible, anywhere you get audiobooks. And I'm working on the 4th one. It will be out in a couple months, very shortly. I am on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it, Facebook, Instagram. I do have a website. That's probably the best place to go to kind of just get links to everything. It's just jacquelynhagen.com.
Yeah, same for me. The website's probably my best hub to go to, J.D.L, Rosell.com. But my ebooks are on Amazon in Kindle Unlimited for the most part. My audiobooks are on Audible, and paperbacks are most places, including my own shop.
And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at RK Ashwick Books. I do have a website, rkashwick.com. And my books are available wide. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Campfire. And I do have an audiobook for Rival Most Vial. And I think Rival actually got picked up for a Kindle deal this month. So there's also that.
All right. Thank you guys so much. And I also want to give PL, my wonderful co-host, a chance to sign off, say any last thoughts, and tell people where they can find you as well.
Oh, first of all, huge honor to have the SPFBO finalists join us. Thank you so much for coming. So insightful. It was wonderful to get to speak to you all. And one more quick thank you again to Connor for organizing them all to get together here. It's been amazing. Yeah, you can find me beside Taylor Molson on one of our channels doing page twoing the books, www.plstore.com, the Drunk Union Saga, mostly on X/Twitter, whatever you like to call it. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but predominantly you can find me lurking on X. And I just want to quickly say that I have had the honor of being part of Before We Go blog as an assistant editor, just as Taylor is, and as being a judge for the last few years. I won't be judging in the coming years, but it's been such an honor. And getting to speak to you with Taylor, it just reminds me of what an honor that is and a privilege to read books of this caliber and to be part of, it's a tough job because, as has been articulated about all the guests, it's just so many great books. You could, 300 books, depending on the judge, you could have so many more semifinalists and finalists, but it just again shows the caliber of the competition and the skill with which these books are being written. And definitely for those of you watching, check out these authors. I expect big things. I know we get a chance to ask if you guys would all enter the competition again in the future. I hope so. So we get to see more of you know, but maybe that's for another. Maybe we bring you guys back and we get to ask some more questions. However, best of luck to all of you in your writing careers, and I know they will continue to flourish. And thanks again so much for joining us.
Thanks to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this was delightful.
Of course. Well, PL said most of what I wanted to say more eloquently than I would have said it anyway. But if you're somehow watching this and you don't know who I am, this is my channel, Maybe Between the Pages. My name is Taylor. I am assistant editor Before We Go blog. I do page tuning with PL. I also do vlogs, reviews, kind of the usual booktube stuff. My Life in Japan vlogs are pretty much a main thing on my channel now, so feel free to check those out if you'd like to. And you can see page tuning episodes on here all the time. I want to say thank you once again so much to you guys for joining us, for writing your books in the first place and giving me something to judge, and for putting it out there. It's a very brave thing to do, and I respect all of you so much for doing it. I could never, truly. Absolutely not. But this has been such a delightful discussion. And to everyone watching now or after, or whoever left comments, you guys are who make page tuning what it is. So thank you for being here. But for now, we're going to head out and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.